All right, so I believe the recording has started. Thank you all so much for coming to our weekly COVID-19 meetup and check-in. Thanks for being so accommodating about the time change as well. As a reminder, we will be meeting from now on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. instead of Wednesdays. So I'll be sure to send out a reminder each week, but just remember now that it is Tuesdays at 3 p.m. instead of Wednesdays. So here is our agenda today. We're going to do our 3 deep breaths again. We're going to talk a little bit more about phase 2. I put further details because I wasn't sure if there was going to be a frequently asked questions document like there was with phase 1. So far, I don't believe there is one, but I did link a couple of the older documents that have some new information in there. So we'll talk about that. We'll go again and discuss reopening and see what things have changed in the past week, see what things you'd like to talk about with your peers, and then we'll cover announcements and new resources as well. Remember, please, at any point in time, if you have anything you'd like to discuss, this time is for you all. So please do bring that up in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself as well. So first things first, we're going to do our 3 deep breaths. I put the picture of lilacs because the aesthetic for this week is purple, and also they're blooming right now, and so they're quite beautiful. If you just want to sit up straight in your chair, try to open up your chest, so bring your shoulders down and back. Really kind of strengthen your core and open up your heart. And if you want to put your hands over your heart, you're more than welcome to. If you want to do cactus arms, which I really like, you'll just bring your arms up when you inhale and you bring them down like a cactus when you exhale. And I feel that really helps to open up the chest cavity. So 3 deep breaths, inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Awesome. And just your weekly reminder to please be generous and kind to yourselves. And we're all doing the best that we can, and you guys are all doing great. So just remember to take 3 deep breaths when you're feeling overwhelmed, and just, tell yourself that you're doing a great job, because you are. So a couple things on phase 2. As you all might have heard already, we are moving into phase 2 on June 1st as the official start date. Not much has actually changed from phase 1. A lot of the questions in terms of what businesses and anyone running an organization should consider, those questions are all still valid and should all be considered carefully. I think the main difference is that there's a little bit higher capacity for enclosed spaces. I think some businesses can move from, I shouldn't quote this. It was either 25 to 50%.
It's gone from, well, yeah, the percentage, I don't know. I know that it was groups of 10 are now groups of 50 as long as social distancing is available.
Yes.
You're right. I forgot to look at the capacity myself.
Yes. So there is a slightly increased capacity, but even though the number of people together is greater, that still means you still need to be able to do the 6 feet of social distancing, the making sure people are wearing masks and all of that stuff. So I've linked the phase 2 directive document, which talks specifically about phase 2 from the governor's office, and then the phase 2 general reopening Montana plan. So that's like a bigger PDF that outlines all the phases in the reopening plan, but I noticed that they added in a few more details to the phase 2 part. So those are pages 15 and 18. So if you want to go and take a look at that, you can do so. So let me actually drop those into the chat box. And I would encourage checking back on these documents. They do seem to be living documents. So things might change, things might get updated. They might still release a FAQ for phase 2 like they did with phase 1, which I think people found the FAQ for phase 1 to be super helpful. And we'll be sure to keep an eye out for that thing and that sort of thing and send it on to you if that does come forth. But just to let you know that these aren't static documents, they are being changed and updated. So now I wanted to talk a little bit more about reopening. I know that there's a lot of stuff that you all are considering, especially as some libraries are starting to reopen, or as you were considering questions, topics, issues. So one thing we wanted to cover was if there are any new pain points or anything that's worked well so far or what hasn't. And if you had any questions to talk about with your peers. So I'll go ahead and open it up to you all. Feel free to use the chat box or you can unmute yourself. No topics or anything?
So I have a question. This is Nancy from Wesworth.
Yeah.
Has anybody had any problem with people coming into the libraries more than what that they can, have they been forced to say, sorry, you can't come into the library, we've reached our maximum? I know I haven't.
Oh, if you have like a 10-person limit or something like that? Yeah, I do know a lot of libraries last week discussed having those limits, but it sounded like people hadn't yet reached those physical limits. As Carolyn said, traffic is very slow. And Jennifer, these documents, I usually link them in the Vimeo description when I upload the recording to these webinars. So I send that out on Wired, and then you can find all of the document links in the Vimeo description. Janine said the main library at Malta has been open part-time since the beginning of May and the branch libraries were closed. Val in Chinook said that it's been slow. Lori says you're opening on June 1st. Fawn in Three Forks, I believe that's Fawn, you're in Three Forks. Sorry if I'm wrong. We had a few that had to wait in the lobby for a few minutes. Abby asked, I'm curious how things went in Kalispell last week. And Sonia says, Miles City hasn't had any problems so far. People have been very conscientious and considerate. And Christine, I think Christine, you're in Plains, says we're open. It's been fairly slow compared to normal. And Pat, I think you're in Ekalaka. Things are slow and no problems. So Nancy, it sounds like there haven't been too many people who've hit that physical limit. I guess Fawn said that they had a few people that had to wait in the lobby for a few minutes. Yeah. So if anyone else has any things to contribute about that. Sydney says, we started curbside in Sydney today and are very busy. Janine says we'll be opening full summer hours in June and branch libraries will be opening. No problem on too many people. They did have to cancel story times because that would have taken us way over the physical limits. And Jennifer in Kalispell said it was really busy and then slow at other times. Don't know a lot about it because we didn't get to have our meeting this morning in Kalispell. Dawn in Glendive says, our concern is when we reopen on June 3rd that we will have an abundance of youth. We will be doing online programming, but will still probably have kids, and how are others bracing for that? And Dawn, I think this was discussed a little bit last week, where some libraries have actually altered their library space, so there's not as much, just in general, there's not as much seating or sort of lounging areas, but then they've also gotten rid of a lot of the toys and some of the games that the kids usually play. And I do remember some libraries saying that minors or children under a certain age have to have a parent with them. So I think, you know, under normal circumstances, some libraries just had, you know, the after school crowd come in and had kids by themselves coming into the library. But I think now they're saying they need to have an adult with them. Sonia says we're hosting story time and summer reading in our city park. Lori says we are using the parks and fairgrounds. Carolyn said we have time limits, which discourages loitering. And Three Forks said we have blocked off our play area and we have a limit of 30 minutes. And Jessica, I'm not sure what library you're from, maybe Marr County. We have adopted a no accompanied youth under 15 policy at this point. Yes, our programs are starting back up outside the library. Jennifer said we don't have toys and are discouraging kids coming in. We really just want adults and are doing online summer reading this summer in Kalispell. Nancy said we've been very busy most of the time. We're limiting access to our computers for a few more weeks. Most patrons are okay with that. Summer lunch program is scheduled to go through August as a pickup program. And yes, Jessica is from Marr County. Great. And Dawn, I think 30 minutes was the most common time limit from what I remember from our discussion last week. If people have other time limits, feel free to contribute as well.
This is Abby from Polson. I was curious, we're not quite open yet and our board's going to meet this Thursday to discuss that, but we're kind of wondering about the bathrooms. We were going to lock them, but we actually can't physically get our women's bathroom door to close.
Ooh.
So yeah, so I'm just curious of those that are keeping their bathrooms open, has it been much of an issue, and are you like cleaning them often or just kind of letting it go and kind of a use at your own risk sort of thing?
I think last week, some of the libraries said that they had closed the library or closed the bathrooms. Wadsworth Library has had us open and trying to get along with the other entity. So what I've had to do, and I think it's far and above excess, every time somebody uses the bathroom, I go in and I just wipe down, you know, like the soap dispensers, the tab, the toilet handles, the faucets, wipe the sinks, the grab handles, you know, the basic surface areas with a wipe. That's what we're doing. It might be a little bit too much for other libraries, but we haven't had a lot of people in, so.
Yeah, and I think what Nancy said, a couple other libraries last week said that they were also doing, I think a library said that they were giving people wipes to wipe down things themselves before they were using it. Let's see, there's been a few more things in the chat. Val says, we thought there'd be an issue with kids in the library, but so far no problem. We're planning to do story walks and check out books outside the school in conjunction with their summer lunch program. Jessica says they have a 30-minute time limit, which they'll stretch if someone's doing something on the computer like a training. Nancy says we're maintaining basic cleanliness in the bathrooms, cleaning twice a week, but it is a use at your own risk. Gail says we plan to have do a basic wipe down once per hour. I'm guessing maybe it's staff. That was a typo. And then Starla says the time limits have kept it from being an issue so far. Carolyn says we're having bathrooms cleaned every night. And yes, it was staff check once, wipe down once an hour from Gail. Val says we are requiring hand washing upon entering. From what I have read, it is not necessary or practical to clean after each use, but we are cleaning more often. And Gail says our maintenance person will clean once per day. I think there were some other libraries that were experimenting with different models. I can't remember which one it was, but I think they were planning on staying open for like 2 hours, then closing for an hour of cleaning, then opening again for a couple hours, and then closing for an hour of cleaning. If anyone else remembers what library that was, or maybe that wasn't, maybe I just made that up.
That was
think
no,
that
that
might
was
have been
Great
Bitter.
Falls.
Oh,
That was
was
Great
it?
Falls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm just.
Yeah, so I think they were thinking about that model, although I don't think they have opened yet, so that might be subject to change. And then Jessica says, with starting programs back up, we are opening bathrooms back up. We already clean each night. So Abby, I hope that answered your question. If you had more specific ones, please feel free to let us know. Awesome. Any other questions regarding new policies? If people want to share their policies, feel free to put that into the chat box, or you can send it to me and I can send that out to people. If there's been, last week we talked a little bit about pushback or support from the community, which, I think there's been, well, it sounds like there's actually been a lot of support from a lot of your communities, but a little bit of pushback in some cases. So if anyone has had any issues with that. Anything else? I'll wait about 20 more seconds. Oh, Starla said we had a patron threaten to start a petition over phone use. I guess it's good for people to have projects. Hopefully it's just, hopefully that won't actually come to anything.
Was that they wanted to use the phone, or you were using the phone and they couldn't? Or what was the question? I'd love to hear that.
Jennifer, we have had 700 or more holds to pull in Kalispell. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot.
I'd say that's pent up demand.
Indeed. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and address some of the other bullet points on this slide, but if you do have any other questions, please do feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll bring them to people's attention. I did want to mention the Department of Commerce. Oh, there's a question from Christine. Is there a courier service yet? And I don't think there is, but Kara, if you're on the call, I don't know if you have an update about that.
The courier will resume service for libraries whenever the libraries decide, if we're referring to the sharing groups, when the sharing groups decide as a group that they are ready to resume transit in between libraries, then the courier is ready when libraries are.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kara. And Christine, I hope that answered your question, but if you have other questions, Kara, I hope you don't mind if I tell her to contact you. You can contact me, but I'll probably just ask Kara. So it's probably
Thanks a lot, Amelia. Geez. Yes, please do.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kara. And then Lori had asked, are you going to send out a survey to see if we are ready? And I think there was a meeting scheduled was there mention of that last week?
Yes, meeting happened. This is Mitch at Livingston. That meeting happened.
Okay.
Survey is forthcoming.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks, Mitch. And then there was a question about quarantining, and 72 hours does seem to be the standard. If you haven't heard, IMLS is doing a study along with ALA and this research institute called Battelle. And it's called the REALM Project, I believe is what it's titled. So it's a long-term study. There are some results forthcoming, but nothing conclusive. And so they're researching how COVID is, how long it stays on materials, and how that might affect library use. So I think all of the MSL staff have followed this project, and we're getting updates, and we'll be sure to share those with you all. But I don't think anything conclusive will be released until a little bit later. But there are some people who are working on this right now. It does seem like the general trend is at least 3 days, if not more. But yeah, 72 hours, I believe, is what most people are doing here. And then Jennifer says, I think we're doing 7 days now in Kalispell. So that's, thanks for sharing. And then Lori said, we have Rubbermaid tubs, 1 per day for 3 days. When books are returned, they are quarantined and then disinfected. So, awesome. So I did want to mention the second bullet point, the Department of Commerce grants. If you saw on Wired, both Belgrade and Great Falls sent something out about how they received a COVID relief grant from Department of Commerce. So Gail, if you were on this call, do you mind talking a little bit about that and what the eligibility is? And I think Susie mentioned it was a pretty easy application, but.
Right. Thank you for your interest in this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. So this is part of the CARES money that's come into all the states. This is Montana's portion of it, of course. And you just simply go into the website, which I can put in the chat box, www.covidreliefmt.org. And there's an array of grants that are listed there. But if you go under the social services nonprofit grant, it will pop up. And this comes through the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I caution you that it's really meant for institutions that have had financial implications based on COVID. So I don't know if there's a library in Montana that's not had financial implications from it, but if not, it would be a little, I think, sketchy to apply for the grant. But it's very, very easy. A phone number, an email, an agency that if you have a foundation or friends that are sponsoring it, but I don't think that's required. You can just simply apply as a library. And then there's 2 really main questions on there for you to think through. The first one is, how has COVID negatively impacted your business? And I'm sure that's easy for any of you to outline that briefly. And then the second big question is, how would you spend the money? And so what we built into it, for an example, was salaries that would go towards some of the new programming and things that we would do. We outlined a couple of on programs that we've done before, like summer reading program, or now we want to do an adult summer reading program. Those things would flip to online with people coming in and picking up the packages or the books that they need to do. So then the other thing that we did put in there, it's something that we started through some donations through local businesses that has gone over really well. And we did, before we did curbside service, we did a materials mailing service for up to 3 items once a week per family or per address. And that was, we got an incredible amount of feedback over that. And so we put in a couple $1,000s to be able to do that, although this is something now that'll move to a board policy level and something that people will qualify for, if you will. Maybe they're home with surgery, maybe they can't drive anymore, but they don't have a way to get to the library. We wanted to be able to have them apply, if you will, with kind of a loose criteria, and then be able to continue that program. So it's really anything that's prompting you from COVID to change the way that you're doing things, which can be as easy as some of the online programming that you're needing to plan and do. The grant is straight $10,000. It's not $11,000. It's not $9,000. And then just be sure that you're COVID specific about it. And then we just sent it in and they try to let you know within the week. And it's a 2-page grant. Just think through what you want to do, and you probably know all the other information. We had to send in a 501(c)(3) because we applied through our foundation, but otherwise, if you have an EIN, they'll require that. They'll let you know that you got the grant, and then they ask you to fill in those basic kinds of things. And then that's it, where to send the check. And so we're expecting that check soon, and we knew within a week.
That is awesome. Thanks so much, Gail, for sharing that. And I did put the 2 grant questions that Gail talked about into the chat box if you guys want to take a look at that. And Gail, do you mind if people ask you questions or send you questions about the grant if they have any?
Oh, they're more than welcome to, of course.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, feel free to apply for that as well. As Gail said, you know, if you're switching some of your services because of COVID and you're pivoting, then I think that's a great use of you know, trying to get money to further those efforts. So.
Well, there's a lot of money that's come into Montana, and so I think that partially helps make it an easy grant to write. So it's well worth your time. You'll be done in less than an hour.
Awesome.
For sure.
Cool. Thanks so much, Gail. And then a couple other things on this slide. So this was something that these 2 blog posts were posts that had been shared among state library staff, and we thought these were just sort of very thought-provoking prompts for us to think about, and we figured that you all might appreciate having the opportunity to think about them as well. So there's 2 posts on here. One of them is from May 12th, and one of them is from May 26th, I believe, which is today. It's from today. And so this blog, the Eblin Group blog, talks a lot about how phase 1 of COVID was a lot of reaction, and it was a lot of emergency response, and it was a lot of like, something's happened and now we have a to-do item. This happens to do, this happens to do. And now that we're in phase 2, things have not necessarily calmed down, but they've shifted in terms of how things are being processed and how people are reacting. And so this is kind of the time to think about not just to-dos and the immediate what's happening right now in front of you, but thinking about the what if questions. And they had a really great description about just that change in attitude and in mental thinking. And this is something that the State Library has also been thinking about as well. And I think it is, just from personal experience, it's sometimes very easy to get down in the weeds and to get caught up in all of those to-dos that you have to do. But it's really important now to start carving out that time for what if this happens, what if that happens, what would we consider doing, how would we change things, and to really start thinking about more than just what's immediately in front of us. So some of the really thought-provoking questions that they were asking on this blog were, what if we have to continue social distancing for a couple of more years? What changes would we have to make? From many accounts, it sounds like COVID will be a cyclical thing, or maybe not cyclical, but it will come in sort of waves. It's not going to be a totally downward trending thing. And so as things spike and as they wane, we might have to, this might be the new normal for a little longer. And how would that change the decisions that we're making now? Another question was, what if we have to drop 50% of the things that we've always done? Which 50% of things would we choose? Which ones would we keep? And why would we pick them? So kind of looking at your services that way. And a really exciting question, I think, to consider is, what if we come out of this stronger, more resilient, and more integral to the community? And what do we need to do to accomplish that outcome? And I think this is something that really resonated for me, because I think I don't know about you all, but when, you know, like an emergency like this happens, I feel like my initial reaction is to be like, okay, batten down the hatches, everyone strap in, and like you kind of want to compress, or you kind of want to draw in upon yourself. But this might be the time that we all need to kind of take up more space and to really fill in all those other spaces that people have drawn out of and drawn onto themselves. So these are just some things that I wanted to pose to the group. I don't know if any of these are really scary for you to think about or interesting to consider, or what sorts of reactions or feelings you might be having, but any thoughts that you all would have to share about this, please do feel free to put those into the chat box. And let me go ahead and actually share these blog links because they were really thought-provoking and really interesting to read. So the first one I'm going to drop in is the one from May 15th or 12th, May 12th, the earlier one. And then the second one is the one that was just posted today. Oh, thanks, Abby. I'm sorry. I'm going to put these in, I posted this in a private chat, so let me put this in the whole chat. So link 1 is the first blog post, and then link 2 is the more recent blog post. And I hope everybody can see that. And I guess for that third question, are there ways that maybe you haven't yet, but you all are thinking about expanding? Or, I mean, there's already ways that we've already filled needs. You know, the fact that curbside has been so popular, and like Montana Library to Go has seen such a huge increase in use, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all examples of people being like, oh, the library, yeah, that's a great place to turn to. But are there other ways that we could be turning outwards and filling in those spaces?
So this is Nancy from Wadsworth. I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if we would have to continue social distancing, I don't understand just exactly how we could carry on any or very many programs in our library. You know, like how do you do story hour with a bunch of 2-year-olds and keep social distancing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody can't stay 6 feet apart. How do you do programs where everybody has to keep 6 feet apart to listen to an author? I mean, you'd have to go outside in the wintertime, which is where most of our programs are. They would, okay, we're doing really the Alaska. We're doing the Alaskan one now, people. Pretend you're in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just be interested in, you know, what other people are thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound from what previously people have chatted, for the summer at least, a lot of people are like, yes, we can go outside and, you know, we're not in contained spaces. So as you said, Nancy, that works for the summer. As long as the weather's nice, who knows, maybe we'll have a bad fire season this year. But once it starts getting cold, you know, that won't really be an option. And maybe this is just me spitballing, but you know, a lot of times when we do record programs and things, we always record attendance and we always record the numbers. But maybe this is a new opportunity where maybe you only have 2 or 3 people at a program, but it's like a really, really great program for those 2 or 3 people. So you're still able to do social distancing with just those 2 or 3 people. And have like a really high quality program where you can also really take the time to measure the impact of a program on a smaller audience. It might involve a reconsideration of what successful programming is.
This is Abby and Polson again. This is something we've been talking about a lot because we've had some Humanities Montana programs where we've had our meeting room completely packed full of people, even some people sitting in our lobby. And, you know, we're trying to think about, like, we'd love to be able to do those programs again, but obviously it can't happen that way. And we haven't measured it all out yet, but we're guessing we might be able to get maybe 20 people into our meeting room at a 6-foot distance from each other. And then it's the question with that is, you know, how do we make it fair so that, you know, who are those 20 people that get to come to a program if that's the way that we move forward?
And
Have you thought
that maybe this is like, oh, sorry, someone else was talking.
this is Joe just responding to Abby. Have you thought about being able to live stream that on Facebook or?
Joe, you're very faint. Do
You are
mind
very
repeating
faint.
that?
I did hear that though.
I had my microphone put up. I apologize. I'm not very technologically alert today. I was just suggesting maybe, yeah, that you YouTube live or Facebook live.
Yeah, that is something we could look at. We got some pushback in the very beginning about Facebook because evidently not everybody's on Facebook. And so
That is true. And there are some pretty negative Facebook, for good reason. I may add pretty negative Facebook people out there. So maybe it is excluding YouTube might be better. But
Sonia said a possibility is using other facilities such as the high school auditorium, which is a really good point. That would give you more space if you had a bigger accommodation. I feel like I read something somewhere. It's very ephemeral in my mind, but it was kind of like a pay it forward program idea. Or not like a pay it forward program, but like the idea of like, you know, people haven't really learned something unless they teach it to somebody else. So maybe building into programming that like you have your initial audience and then they have this kind of unofficial assignment to go and like teach it to somebody else, and then you have, or discuss it with somebody else, and then you have some sort of community space to discuss it. I forget where I read that. So that's not super helpful, just a general idea.
You could always do like, you know, let's have a lottery or something, which implies that, okay, people are going to like buy tickets and have a chance to win, which is not really what we want to do in a public library, but some kind of drawing, you know, or something. I don't know. So you could have 10 people or whoever, you could figure out how many you could do that, but then maybe you could stream it or record it in your meeting area and then post it for other people to watch later. Like the people who win get their name pulled out of the hat get to see it live, and other people get the delayed streaming. I don't know. Like Mitch says, the 20 richest, clearly. Yeah, it's a fundraiser for your foundation.
Yeah, I see part of the problem if you're talking about videoing it and streaming it and all that. Most of my people who come to my program, they don't do tech.
Right.
I don't even have that possibility of doing that. So, you know, good. I'm glad some people do, but I really have to work things out a completely different way, and I don't know how to do that yet.
And maybe, you know, if like, you know, if you have that lottery system of people who are interested, you could kind of pair people up and say, you know, would you be willing to give a summary of this talk to another person if the presenter for some reason doesn't want to do a recording, they'd rather do something in person. So you have your initial like 10, 20 people and then kind of bring it further from there as a way to also further connect your community too. But that also kind of opens up a can of worms in terms of giving out contact information. But maybe it's like an opt-in thing. I don't know.
Yeah, we're all just tossing out ideas that really we haven't thought them through at all.
Give Abby more things to do.
More of an ideas person, not about the logistics.
It may be worthwhile to, you know, this is maybe just something you just don't do for the next year. And that's also a decision you get to make. Really, you have to focus your energy on things that are going to really meet your mission.
That are going to work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
you-
Mitch is pointing out that you need to make sure to get clearance from the speaker before you broadcast or record anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of. So something else I'll just mention, because I haven't participated in some of the webinars that are out there, but the whole statistics survey is going to be impacted by this because you won't be having programs in your library. You won't be able to count attendance. And I know there is discussion about the data among the data coordinators of how are they going to count these things next year, or how are the questions on the public library survey going to either be changed or added or something. So that's just an idea down the road, or something to watch out for in the future. And I'm sure Jessica Edwards will be sending out more information, but that's something that the data coordinators are looking into now in the future. And
Well,
yeah,
Thanks,
you may
Anne.
not do programs for a while and you won't be able to count attendance. And that question either has to go away or have a little asterisk of there was nothing in 2020 or something.
Well, and what struck me when I was first looking at this is, you know, in a way, these can represent some opportunities to kind of rethink how and why we've been doing things, you know, because I know we tend to kind of get into a rut of, you know, okay, we need to do, you know, we need to do so many programs, we need to do, you know, so many things with books, you know, I mean, and it's just basically what we've been doing, and it's been successful with the people who like the libraries and have been using the libraries. And so, you know, we like to please those people and, you know, keep it going. But, you know, when you get things kind of turned topsy-turvy like this, and it's a difficulty, it's also an opportunity. And, you know, what I first thought about was applying design thinking principles to this. And I'm not an expert enough to be able to do it because Pam and I were going to delve into it at one point, and we still haven't gotten around to it.
It's true.
But, you know, this might be a really good opportunity to use some of these kinds of things, you know, and there are toolkits available. And, you know, for those who are interested, we might take this on as a project. And, you know, and what you do is, you know, you go in, you analyze some of the stuff, and then you just do some, you know, you just throw a bunch of ideas out there and see what sticks. And it's a chance to, you know, be creative and try some things out. And, you know, kind of figure out what's really important and what you want to keep, and, you know, maybe some things that you don't, and see what works and what doesn't. And, you know, we might be able to really make some, if not, well, I mean, even improvements as a result of this. And so, you know, I mean, I don't expect that we're going to have the answers today, but I think it's a good chance to start looking at this and going, you know, do we want to take a chance and dive in and look at these things a little bit and see if maybe we can come up with some new ways of providing our services, and maybe not even the same old ways we've been doing them during the pandemic so far. You know, so I mean, I'm certainly open if people want to talk about this and work with it, and because I need more projects.
Oh, do you, Suzanne? And I don't mean to muddy the waters even more, but something else that these blogs mentioned, this wasn't written specifically by a library person. They were kind of just talking about like general organizations and businesses. But they were also talking about like customer input and patron input. And I'm sure, I mean, I know that you all are already getting lots of patron input. You guys get patron input all the time from, you know, just by doing your jobs. But, you know, if you do have an idea, like seeing what people think, what sorts of ideas, and especially if you're like, these are the parameters through which we're working in, and we really want to do something that does this outcome, you know, and seeing what people come up with, because sometimes, you know, on the administration side, I found that sometimes I just have these like weird assumptions. I guess they're not weird assumptions, but just like assumptions on like my end. And then I talk to somebody and they're like, well, just about this way. And I'm like, oh, Yeah, that would work. So, you know, that might be a little further down the road though, but I find they want this to be just as they were. Yes, that is also a thing depending on who you're talking to. They want things to be just as they were.
People don't always like change. Even if we see it as an opportunity, other people are going to see it as a disaster and they want it to go back to normal, what they consider normal.
Yeah.
So you have to
But kind of along that line too, you know, the people who've been using us want things to be just as they were. But for most of us, even in libraries that are, you know, pretty popular and have good public support, there's a lot of people who don't currently use the library. And, you know, we can have opportunities to, you know, to reach some of them too. So it's like,
Cool. Well, you know, I love asking questions that I don't know the answers to. But we thought that these were really thought-provoking questions and were things, you know, that we all could probably benefit from considering. So please do feel free to share with your peers and with us if you have any thoughts or ideas to share. I think this is something that we're all kind of grappling with. And just as a reminder that these are good things to consider and to answer. So, Suzanne, I do not have all the answers. If I had all the answers, my eggplant would have died. So we are going to move on. I know we are reaching 4 p.m. So if you do need to sign off at that point, please feel free to. Again, there will be a recording, but next we're moving into just announcements and new resources. But please do feel free to put in any other questions into the chat box if you'd like to revisit any of the other topics we've talked about. So just as a few announcements, the Aspen Basics class is starting tomorrow on the 27th at 3 p.m. This is going to be a monthly class. So I believe all of those are entered into the Aspen events calendar and you can find them and register for them. Tomorrow is session 1 and it's about how to register for an Aspen account.
From the very beginning of
beginning.
Never been on Aspen before, and our trusty tech guy Chuck is putting our presentation together tomorrow. So you can pick and choose between these classes. You don't need to come to all of them. They will of course be recorded. There'll be a short demo at the very beginning, and then we'll end the recording, and there'll just be opportunity for people to practice those tasks in Aspen, completing those tasks in Aspen. So
and I think anyone can attend this, so this would be great to recommend to your trustees, and the session 1 would be a great one to attend if they haven't registered in Aspen before. So
and you get to meet Chuck and hear his voice and get to know some of his crazy humor the way the rest of us have.
Yeah,
he's delightful.
He is.
He's nervous. No one's gonna come. He just messaged me.
Aww.
No one's gonna come. I'm like, no, that's not true.
And then he'll be overwhelmed when we all show up tomorrow.
I know.
Everybody needs to come.
We'll also be putting together a series of handouts, some with screenshots and some just sort of step by step that you can refer to. So at the end of the series, we'll have a whole, Aspen user's manual put together. Should be fun.
Great.
As much fun as you can have doing Aspen.
What are you talking about? Aspen's a blast. Kara asked a question. What other cultural organizations or industries are grappling with some of these same service and program challenges? And can they offer examples or partnership opportunities? That's actually a really great question, Kara.
Maybe it's time to reach back out to the public, to the museum group. Oh, Jennifer knows the museum group. We could reach out to them. You and I did have some preliminary discussion with the nonprofit association.
Yeah, they'd be another good person to check in with. So maybe I'll put that on my to-do list and then sort of report back and see what other organizations are doing. I think that would be good
We have
to.
a MAM meeting on Friday this week, so the Montana Association of Museums, which I'm on the board of, and I can report back to you on kind of what they're doing, but they definitely have been grappling with these issues, and there's been lots of discussion within the museum world about what to do and how to open and how they fall into things. You know, were specifically mentioned a few weeks ago as far as governor's orders for slowly reopening in phase one, where they weren't before. And so that had caused a lot of questions and a lot of discussion. So it's one of the reasons I've sat in and listened so hard on all of these discussions, is so I can share with them, because they're learning a lot from you guys, just so you know.
Awesome. Yeah, and Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, anything that comes up, that would be really great.
I'd be happy to.
Perfect. So a couple other things on here. There is going to be another summer reading brainstorm webinar on June 11th at 11 a.m. I forget what day of the week that is, but it is in Aspen, so you can register for it there, and the Zoom link is in the description, and you can find it there. And then for libraries who have started using Read Squared, they've scheduled 4 training sessions for us. I believe there are 2 left. If you have questions on when those are, please let me know and I will send you that information. But I also wanted to let you know that there is now a Read Squared discussion thread on the MSL community forum. And so you can ask questions on there, share any thoughts or new features that you've discovered, that sort of thing. And then also a few of the staff members from the Billings Public Library are following that thread, and they've been using Read Squared for about 4 or 5 years now. So I think they kind of know the ins and outs of things pretty well, and they said that they'd be happy to answer any questions. So I put that into the chat box, and you're welcome to post things in there. If you're interested in using Read Squared and you haven't signed up yet, please let me know and I can connect you on how to best do that. Oh, there's a question from Jody. I have some families pushing for story time to resume. Our summer story time is typically held outside in the park. And with phase 2 starting next week, the families that have been ready and waiting are even more eager. I know some libraries are holding story times outdoors, but I don't feel comfortable with it yet myself, and I am the one that leads the story time. Beyond that, as director, I'm so busy working out a reopening plan, constantly scrounging for sanitizer, disinfectant, etc., etc. Does anyone have any language about why story time won't resume in phase 2? So if anyone has anything to contribute for Jody, please do let us know. And
that
yes,
was my question. Like she just said, is there a chance you'd have more than 50 for story time? That would be certainly a reason not to have story time.
Yeah. And there wouldn't be a way necessarily for you to control crowd size since it's outside too.
Could you just use the fact that you have to maintain social distancing and it's
and you can't
difficult.
do that with little kids for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. People feel free to respond to Jody in the chat box. I will move on to the next bullet point. There is also a discussion thread that I started on library art exhibit policies. Someone had asked something about that on Wired. So if your library shows art in the library and has a policy around that, feel free to drop that into this discussion thread and share that. You can either drop the actual policy text in there or you can just do a quick summary. But I figured that might be something that multiple people could benefit from. Something that's very exciting. So we now have access to a graphic novels and online comic repository through BiblioBoard. BiblioBoard has a lot of this kind of licensed content, and they've made it available to any state that's asked for it. For free until August 31st. So they have about 3,000 titles, and it's a wide variety from like modern stuff that's being published now to like those, like bam, pow, Batman kind of comics from long ago. So we have the state of Montana has free simultaneous use, unlimited use of this resource until August 31st. So this is something that's geolocated. So as long as your ISP or whoever's accessing it, the ISP looks like it's from Montana, they'll be able to access it for free. And you can access it through your internet browser on a computer, or you can also access it on your phone, and you can download the app to it as well. Let's see, Sydney Richland County Library asks, can a link to BiblioBoard be added in the catalog for MSC libraries? That's a very good question. I will ask and see. And I'll get back to you on that. But yeah, it's a pretty cool resource. I've poked around in there. If, you know, especially for teens, I think with summer reading, I think this could be a really great resource to use. So I'd encourage you to check it out and see if you like it.
Amelia, this is Rebecca speaking. And if Sydney Richland would like a link to BiblioBoard on their catalog, that's fine. Just open a ticket and I can add that for you.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Additionally, there is an event from the Missoula Public Library. They are holding a Lawyers and Libraries event, and they have a local attorney coming in to talk about the importance of legal access and access to justice, as well as voting rights. That's the theme for Law Day this year. And then they're also having a fellow from the ACLU come and talk about voting rights on the reservations and a recent case that was decided upon regarding voting rights on reservations. So they are holding this through Zoom on the 28th at 6 p.m. But anyone is welcome to attend. So if you think this is something that your community might be interested in, feel free to publicize that. And I'll put that Facebook link into the chat box, and I'll send a reminder about it on Wired tomorrow as well. And then another reminder, the People's Connect Institute, is that what that stands for? I think it does.
People Connect Institute.
People Connect Institute, yes.
Yeah.
So
People
Joe
Connect.
has organized and licensed content from them. So we'll be having a webinar every Wednesday at 10:30. And you can register for those in Aspen. And
Also,
this week,
send me an email and I will send you the list that has the direct links into WebEx. We just can't share this information out with librarians outside of Montana. So that's why I can't put the link directly in Aspen, because Aspen links are open, you know, to the world. But you can just send me an email and I'll send you the Word document that has all the links in it, and then but if you register in Aspen, of course, it'll make it easier for you to get your credit later.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really great topics. I think this one was, this week's was geeky. Yes.
All about geeky programs.
About geeky programs. So please do sign in tomorrow at 10:30 if you are interested in attending. And then for some new resources, some of these I've already linked. So the Phase 2 directive document from the governor's office, that was the document that I put on the slide earlier. Again, just a reminder to check back on those documents because they do change and they are updated. I put into the reopening guide the email from Wired from Tracy about Phase 2 information and how this is different from Phase 1, questions to consider, et cetera, et cetera. So that is there if you need to refer to that. There was also a webinar that was sent to me from Demco about COVID-19 and safety tips for reopening your library. It's a recording at this point. This webinar was presented on, the date is covered up. I don't remember. I think mid-May, something like that. But you can watch that recording and see if you are interested in that. And let me actually just put these links into the chat box real quick. So there is the information on Phase 2 email. This next one is the directive document. And then this other one is the DEMCO webinar. So those are all in the reopening guide. In the general resources guide, the Department of Commerce COVID relief grants, so what Gail was talking about earlier. There's also a great article from the Bozeman Public Library about them giving away donated books at their summer lunch program. So I do encourage you to check that out and just to celebrate in Bozeman's success. And I will put that into the chat box. Additionally, we are going to start doing weekly summaries of the COVID meetups, specifically from the chat box, which, by the way, you all are welcome to save the chat box. If you go into the chat box and click on that ellipse menu, you can click Save As, and it will download a text file. But especially for people who aren't able to attend live, there's a lot of stuff that comes in through the chat box that's really great. So we are planning on summarizing things and kind of giving a high level idea of the topics that we discuss and the things that people are contributing. Trying to keep it a little bit anonymous as well. And just so you can kind of get an idea of what people are talking about each week. So I put that into that link into the chat box. You can click follow if you click on that link, and anytime I update that, you'll get an email, so you'll be able to read it if you want. And then, let's see, let me move this out of the way. Suzanne sent something. Oh, maybe Suzanne, you sent it to me. Maybe you didn't send it on Wired. I actually don't remember. But there are free virtual digital skills training from Grow with Google. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Grow with Google program, and they have expanded their offerings and made things free with the effects from COVID. So this is something that I'm looking into as well for economic development purposes. But if this is something that your library is interested in, please do take a look and see if anything on there seems useful. And that is it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And